Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Our first story is titled, "Caught My Wife's Affair, so I want a divorce, and she's doing everything she can to stop me." My name's Evan. I'm 35 years old, and up until a few months ago, I thought I had a pretty good life. I had a stable job as an accountant, a nice house in the suburbs, and what I believe was a happy 10-year marriage to my college sweetheart, Brianna. We met in our junior year and hit it off right away. Brianna was smart, funny, and gorgeous. I felt like I'd hit the jackpot. After graduation, we both landed good jobs in the city and got married a couple years later. For the most part, things were great. We had our ups and downs like any couple, but I really thought we were solid. That all came crashing down about 6 months ago. I had been working late at the office trying to finish up some reports before a big client meeting the next day. It was around 9 p.m. when I finally wrapped up and headed home. As I pulled into our driveway, I noticed an unfamiliar car parked on the street in front of our house. I didn't think much of it at first, probably just one of the neighbors having friends over. But then as I walked up to the front door, I heard muffled voices and laughter coming from inside. My stomach dropped. Brianna hadn't mentioned having anyone over, and it was pretty late for casual visitors. I quietly unlocked the door and stepped inside. The voices were coming from upstairs. As I crept up the steps, my heart pounding, I could make out Brianna's voice. And a man's. They were in our bedroom. I stood frozen outside the door, my mind racing. Part of me didn't want to believe what was happening, but I knew I had to see for myself. I took a deep breath and pushed open the door, and there they were. Brianna and some guy I'd never seen before, tangled up in our bed. They both jolted upright when they saw me. Brianna's face went pale. "Evan," she gasped. I can explain." But there was nothing to explain. It was all painfully clear. I just turned and walked out without a word, ignoring Brianna calling after me. I got in my car and drove to a nearby hotel in a daze. That night, as I lay awake staring at the ceiling, my entire world felt like it was crumbling around me. The next morning, Brianna blew up my phone with calls and texts, begging me to come home so we could talk. I ignored them all. I needed time to process what had happened and figure out what to do next. After a couple days, I finally agreed to meet her at a coffee shop to hear her out. "Evan, I'm so sorry," Brianna said, her eyes brimming with tears. "It was a huge mistake. It didn't mean anything, I swear. Please, we can work through this. I love you." I just stared at her, feeling numb. "How long has this been going on?" I asked flatly. Brianna looked down at the table. It was just a one-time thing. I met Jake at a work conference last month and we got drinks after. One thing led to another, but I swear it was only that one time. I felt awful about it immediately." I didn't buy it for a second. The way they had been laughing and carrying on, it sure didn't seem like a first-time hookup, but I was too exhausted to argue. "I need some time," I told her. "I'm going to stay with my brother for a while to clear my head." Brianna nodded, wiping away tears. "Of course, take all the time you need. I'll be here when you're ready to talk more. I love you so much, Evan. We can get past this. I know we can." I just got up and left without another word. Over the next few weeks, I did a lot of soul searching. I talked things through with my brother, my parents, and a couple close friends. The more I thought about it, the more I realized our marriage had been rocky for a while. We'd grown distant over the past year or two, barely spending any quality time together. I chalked it up to normal relationship ebbs and flows, but now I saw it differently. After about a month, I came to a decision. I wanted a divorce. The trust was shattered and I didn't see how we could rebuild it. When I told Brianna, she broke down sobbing. Please, Evan, don't do this, she begged. It was one stupid mistake. I'll do anything to make it up to you. We can go to counseling, take a trip together to reconnect. Just please don't throw away 10 years over one night. I shook my head. I'm sorry, Brianna, but my mind is made up. I've already talked to a lawyer, and I'm filing for divorce. That's when things got ugly. Brianna went from apologetic to angry in an instant. You can't do this to me, she shouted. I won't let you divorce me. I'll fight you every step of the way. And boy, did she ever. Over the next few months, Brianna pulled out all the stops trying to prevent the divorce from happening. At first, she tried emotional manipulation, calling me constantly in tears, showing up at my work to make a scene, even faking a health scare to get my attention. When that didn't work, she moved on to more underhanded tactics. She drained our joint bank accounts and maxed out our credit cards on lavish purchases, trying to leave me in financial ruin. She spread vicious rumors about me to all our friends and family, claiming I was abusive and that's why she cheated. She even tried to get me fired from my job by sending my boss fake emails from my work account bad-mouthing clients. But Brianna didn't stop there. She began stalking me, showing up at places she knew I frequented. One day I was having lunch with a female coworker to discuss a project and Brianna burst into the restaurant accusing me of cheating on her. She caused such a scene that we were asked to leave. Another time she somehow got hold of my new phone number, which I had changed to avoid her calls, and began leaving me dozens of voicemails daily, alternating between tearful pleas and angry threats. She even went so far as to contact my elderly parents, spinning a tale about how I was having a mental breakdown and needed to be committed for my own safety. Thankfully, my parents knew better than to believe her, but it was incredibly stressful for them. One of her most outrageous attempts came when she tried to frame me for theft at my workplace. She snuck into the office after hours. She still had a copy of my key and planted some expensive equipment in my desk drawers. Luckily, the security cameras caught her in the act, and this attempt backfired spectacularly, only serving to strengthen my case for divorce. It was exhausting and infuriating, but I was determined to see this through. I wasn't going to let her bully me into staying in a broken marriage. Luckily, I had some good people in my corner. My brother let me crash at his place rent-free, while I got back on my feet financially. My parents loaned me money for a good lawyer, and my best friend, who worked in IT, helped me gather digital evidence of Brianna's smear campaign and attempts to sabotage my job. Things came to a head about 2 months into the divorce proceedings. I was leaving work one evening when I saw Brianna's car pull into the parking lot. She got out and stormed over to me, looking furious. You bastard, she screamed. How dare you try to take the house from me? That's my home. I tried to calm her down. Brianna, please, we've been over this. The house will be sold and the proceeds split equally. That's perfectly fair. But she wasn't having it. She started hitting me, pounding her fists against my chest. It's not fair. None of this is fair. You're ruining my life. I grabbed her wrist to stop the assault. Brianna, you need to leave now before I call the police. Her eyes flashed with rage. Then, to my shock, she started tearing at her own clothes and screaming, Help! He's attacking me! Somebody help! I immediately let go of her and backed away, my heart racing. A couple of my coworkers came running out of the building to see what the commotion was. Brianna was on the ground now, crying hysterically and pointing at me. He tried to assault me, she sobbed. I came to talk about the divorce, and he just snapped. I was speechless. I couldn't believe she would stoop this low. Luckily, my coworkers knew me well and didn't seem to buy her story. Evan, what's going on? My friend asked, eyeing Brianna warily. I took a deep breath. She showed up unannounced and started screaming at me about the divorce. Then she attacked me, and when I defended myself, she started putting on this show. I turned to Brianna. I have no idea what you thought this would accomplish, but it's over. Leave now or I really will call the cops. Brianna glared at me venomously, then got up and stormed off to her car. As she peeled out of the parking lot, I let out a huge sigh of relief. That had been way too close. The next day, I went straight to my lawyer and told him what happened. He advised me to file for a restraining order, which I did. We also stepped up our efforts to gather evidence of all of Brianna's attempts at manipulation and sabotage. Over the next few weeks, we built a rock-solid case. We had financial records showing how she drained our accounts. We had copies of the slanderous emails she'd sent about me. We even had security camera footage from my office parking lot showing her attacking me, then faking an assault. When we presented all this in court, Brianna's lawyer looked like he wanted to crawl under the table. The judge was clearly not impressed with her behavior. In the end, the divorce was granted on my terms. The house was sold and assets split 50-50 as I'd originally proposed. Brianna's attempts to paint herself as the victim had backfired spectacularly. As we left the courtroom after the final hearing, I felt an enormous weight lift off my shoulders. It was finally over. Brianna tried to approach me one last time. "Evan, please," she said quietly. "I know I messed up. I let things get out of hand, but I still love you. Can't we try to work things out?" I shook my head. "It's too late for that, Brianna. I hope you get the help you need, but we're done. Goodbye." And with that, I walked away and didn't look back. The months following the divorce were a roller coaster of emotions. Some days I felt liberated and excited about my newfound freedom. Other days, the weight of everything I've been through would come crashing down, leaving me feeling lost and alone. I knew I needed help processing everything, so I started seeing a therapist. She was a godsend. She helped me work through my feelings of betrayal, anger, and grief. We talked about how the divorce had shaken my self-esteem and made me question my judgment. "Evan," she said during one session, "it's important to remember that Brianna's actions are a reflection of her, not you. You didn't cause her to cheat or behave the way she did during the divorce." I nodded, but I still felt a gnawing doubt. "I know that logically, but I can't help wondering if I could have done something differently. If I had been a better husband, maybe none of this would have happened." She leaned forward. "That's a common reaction, but it's not healthy or accurate. Brianna made her choices. You're not responsible for her actions. What we need to focus on now is how you can move forward and rebuild your life." Over time, with my therapist's guidance, I started to heal. I learned to be kinder to myself, to acknowledge my pain without letting it consume me. I started journaling, pouring out my thoughts and feelings onto paper. It was cathartic, helping me process emotions I didn't even know I had. I also threw myself into new hobbies and activities. I joined a local hiking group and discovered a love for nature I never knew I had. The physical exertion and beautiful scenery were incredibly therapeutic. Being around new people who didn't know about my past was refreshing too. I started taking cooking classes, something I'd always wanted to do but never had the time for when I was married. Learning to create delicious meals from scratch gave me a sense of accomplishment and independence. One of the biggest steps in my healing journey was reconnecting with old friends I'd lost touch with during my marriage. I reached out to my college buddy who I hadn't spoken to in years. "Evan, man, it's great to hear from you," he explained when I called him. It's been way too long. We met up for beers, and it was like no time had passed. As I filled him in on everything that had happened, he listened with genuine concern. I'm so sorry you went through all that, he said, but I'm proud of you for standing your ground and getting out of that toxic situation. His words meant more to me than he could know. Having that outside validation from someone who knew me before Brianna helps reinforce that I'd made the right decision. As the months went by, I slowly started to feel like myself again, or rather, a new version of myself. I was more self-aware, more in tune with my own needs and boundaries. I learned to enjoy my own company, to find fulfillment in my own pursuits rather than seeking it from someone else. About a year after the divorce, I decided to take a solo trip to Europe, something I'd always dreamed of doing but had put off for various reasons. As I stood atop the Eiffel Tower, looking out over the twinkling lights of Paris, I felt a profound sense of peace wash over me. I realized that while the divorce had been painful, it had also been a catalyst for growth. I was stronger now, more resilient. I had faced one of my worst fears, the breakdown of my marriage, and survived. Not only survived, but thrived. When I returned home, I felt rejuvenated and ready for whatever life had in store for me next. I wasn't actively looking for a new relationship, but I was open to the possibility if the right person came along. More importantly, I had learned to love and trust myself again. I knew now that no matter what challenges life threw my way, I had the strength and resilience to handle them. It was around this time, about 18 months after the divorce, that I started hearing bits and pieces about Brianna's life post-divorce. I hadn't kept in touch with her or any of our mutual friends, but news had a way of trickling through even the most distant social connections. I was having coffee with an old college acquaintance who both my ex-wife and I had known when Brianna's name came up. He had run into her at a local charity event. "Man, she did not look good," he said, shaking his head. "She seemed really, I don't know, lost, desperate." She latched onto me and wouldn't stop talking about how much she regretted everything that happened with you. I felt a twinge of something, not quite sympathy, but not quite satisfaction either. "Did she say anything else?" I asked, trying to keep my tone neutral. He nodded. "Yeah, she mentioned she'd lost her job. Apparently, word got around about how she behaved during your divorce, and her company let her go. She's been struggling to find work since." I absorbed this information silently. Part of me felt like Brianna was finally facing the consequences of her actions, but another part felt the sadness for the person I once loved. Another snippet of information came from my old neighbor. He still lived next door to our old house and had kept in touch with Brianna's parents. "I ran into Brianna's mom at the grocery store," he told me over the phone. "Poor woman looked worn out, apparently. Brianna moved back in with them a few months ago. She's been going to therapy, trying to get her life back on track." After hanging up, I sat in silence for a long time, processing everything I'd heard. Brianna's life had taken a dramatic downturn since our divorce. While a small, petty part of me felt vindicated, mostly I just felt sad. Sad for the life we'd lost, sad for the person Brianna had become, sad for all the pain and turmoil of the past 2 years. But as I looked around my apartment, my space filled with mementos from my European trip, books on my new hobbies, and photos of the new friends I'd made, I realized something important. I couldn't control Brianna's journey or choices. I could only control my own. I decided then that I would let go of any lingering resentment or anger towards Brianna. Not for her sake, but for my own. I would wish her well in my heart and hope that she found the help she needed to heal and grow, just as I had. The next morning, I woke up feeling lighter than I had in years. I made myself a gourmet breakfast, thanks cooking classes, then headed out for a hike with my new friends from the local outdoor club. As I breathed in the fresh air and took in the beautiful scenery, I felt truly, deeply happy. Life after divorce wasn't what I had expected, but in many ways it was better. I was stronger, more self aware, and more appreciative of the simple joys in life. Whatever the future held, I knew I was ready to face it head on. And as for Brianna, I hope she would find her way too. But that was her journey now, not mine. My path lay ahead full of possibilities, and I was excited to see where it would lead. Here are my thoughts about the story. Can we talk about Brianna for a hot minute? I mean, holy moly, talk about going off the deep end. At first, I was kind of feeling bad for her, you know? We've all made mistakes, right? But then she just kept digging that hole deeper and deeper. By the time she was trying to frame Evan for theft and faking assault, I was sitting here with my jaw on the floor. Like, girl, what are you doing? But you know what really got me? It was Evan's journey. This dude went through the ringer, and then some. I found myself getting angry on his behalf, especially when Brianna was pulling all those crazy stunts. But the way he handled it all, absolute class act. Especially the assault thing. I can't get that out of my mind, and I don't mean that in a good way. There are too many horror stories out there about women falsely accusing men of assault and ruining their lives. Evan really dodged a bullet. Well, no, more like a bullet train with that one. I gotta admit, there were moments when I was yelling at my screen like, Evan, buddy, get a restraining order already. But I guess hindsight is 20/20, right? Let's be real. When you're in the middle of that kind of emotional tornado, it's hard to think straight. Though his lawyer should have really recommended for him to get one after literally any of those incidents. Why didn't they do that now that I think about it? But now let's talk about that post-divorce glow-up. Evan joining a hiking group, taking cooking classes, solo trip to Europe. Yes, yes, and hell yes. This is the kind of post-breakup energy we all need. I was sitting here taking notes like, note to self, if life gives you lemons, make a gourmet lemon souffle and eat it on top of the Eiffel Tower. But you know what really hit me in the feels? It was that ending. When Evan started hearing about Brianna's life after the divorce, I was bracing myself for a satisfying revenge story ending. But the way he reacted, man, that's growth right there. I probably couldn't do that, petty as I am. But you know, full props to Evan. It's a lot harder to do what he did than just to feel good about your ex ruining her life. And can we give a shout out to therapy? Like, good therapists, wherever you are, you're the real MVP of this story. It's so refreshing to see a narrative that doesn't shy away from the importance of mental health support after trauma. Now, I know some of you in the comments are probably going to be like, Alex, come on, Brianna got what she deserved. And look, I get it. What she did was seriously messed up. But I think the real takeaway here is how Evan chose to handle it all. He didn't let the bitterness consume him. He didn't spend years plotting revenge. He picked himself up, dusted himself off, and built a life he loves. And honestly, that's the best revenge of all, living better than the person who put you down.
And now, guys, we will move on to the second story of the video. Please like the video if you have enjoyed it so far. The story starts like this.
Entitled sister demands I hand over my inheritance to fund her lavish wedding. Buckle up, because this is going to be a long one. Let me start by introducing the key players in this saga. There's me, Alyssa, the older sister. I'm 32, work as an accountant, and have always been the more responsible, level-headed one in the family. Then there's my younger sister, Sadie, 28, a social media influencer and perpetual drama queen. Our parents, while loving, have always had a bit of a blind spot when it comes to Sadie's antics. Our story begins about 3 years ago when our beloved grandfather passed away. He was a kind, hard-working man who had built a successful small business from the ground up. When his will was read, we were all surprised to learn that he had left a significant inheritance to both Sadie and me. I was touched by his generosity and immediately started thinking about how I could use the money wisely. Maybe invest in a house or start my own business. Sadie, on the other hand, saw dollar signs and started planning an extravagant lifestyle upgrade. Things were fine for a few months. I put my inheritance into a high-yield savings account while I figured out my next move. Sadie blew through a chunk of hers on designer clothes and a luxury vacation. Then came the announcement that changed everything. Sadie burst into our parents' house one Sunday dinner, flashing a massive diamond ring. "I'm engaged," she squealed, jumping up and down. We all congratulated her, of course. Her boyfriend, Cole, was a nice enough guy, if a bit unmotivated. "We're going to have the most amazing wedding," Sadie gushed. "I'm thinking a destination ceremony in the Maldives, then a reception back here for everyone else. Oh, and I've already found the perfect dress. It's Vera Wang, of course." I could see the concern on our parents' faces. They exchanged a look that said, "How on earth is she going to afford this?" As if reading their minds, Sadie turned to me with a sickly sweet smile. "Alyssa, darling," she said, her voice dripping with false sincerity. "You know how much this means to me. I was wondering if you might consider sharing some of your inheritance to help make my dream wedding a reality." I was stunned. Was she seriously asking me to hand over my inheritance for her wedding? I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "Sadie, I'm really happy for you, but I can't just give you my inheritance. That's a lot of money, and have my own plans for it." Sadie's face fell, then quickly twisted into a scowl. "But you don't need it," she whined. "You already have a good job and an apartment. I'm trying to start my life with Cole. Don't you want me to be happy?" "Of course, I want you to be happy," I said, feeling my patience wearing thin. "But that doesn't mean I have to fund your entire wedding. Maybe you should consider scaling back your plans a bit." That was apparently the wrong thing to say. Sadie burst into tears, wailing about how I was ruining her special day and how I'd always been jealous of her. Our parents predictably rushed to comfort her in her tantrum. "Alyssa," my mom said, giving me a disapproving look, "can't you help your sister out? It's her wedding day after all." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Mom, it's not just a little bit of money she's asking for. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars for one day. That's insane." "It's not just one day," Sadie shouted through her tears. "It's the most important day of my life. You're so selfish, Alyssa. You've always been jealous of me." The argument went on for hours. Sadie alternated between crying and screaming. While our parents tried to guilt me into giving in, I stood my ground, but by the end of the night, I felt like the bad guy. Over the next few weeks, the pressure intensified. Sadie started a smear campaign against me on social media, posting tearful videos about how her greedy sister was ruining her dream wedding. Our extended family started calling, urging me to do the right thing and help Sadie. Even my parents got in on the act. They called me daily, trying to persuade me to change my mind. "Sadie's always been more fragile than you," my mom would say. "She needs this more than you do. Can't you just be the bigger person?" It was exhausting and infuriating. I felt like I was going crazy. Was I really being selfish for not wanting to hand over my inheritance? I decided to seek some outside perspective and made an appointment with a therapist. My therapist listened patiently as I poured out the whole story. When I finished, he sat back and gave me a sympathetic smile. Alyssa, she said, you're not being selfish. Your inheritance is yours to use as you see fit. Your sister's sense of entitlement is the problem here, not your perfectly reasonable desire to keep your own money. Those words were exactly what I needed to hear. I left the session feeling validated and more determined than ever to stand my ground. The next family dinner was tense, to say the least. Sadie ignored me completely, while our parents kept shooting me disappointed looks. Finally, I'd had enough. Look, I said, putting down my fork with a clank. I'm sorry that Sadie is upset, but I'm not changing my mind. My inheritance is not up for grabs, Sadie. If you can't afford the wedding you want, then you need to adjust your plans. That's what adults do. Sadie's face turned red with anger. You've always been so mean to me, she shrieked. Mom, Dad, are you going to let her talk to me like that? To my shock, our parents nodded, if hesitantly. Alyssa's right, sweetie, Dad said gently. Maybe we should look at some more realistic options for the wedding. Sadie's jaw dropped. She clearly wasn't used to not getting her way. Fine, she yelled, standing up so abruptly her chair fell over. I'll have my dream wedding without any of you. You're all dead to me. She stormed out, slamming the door behind her. The silence she left behind was deafening. From that day on, things were different in our family. Sadie refused to speak to any of us, blocking us on all social media platforms. Our parents were upset but seemed to finally be realizing how out of hand Sadie's behavior had become. As for me, I decided it was time to put my inheritance to good use. I'd always had a passion for sustainable fashion, and with the help of a business advisor, I put together a plan for an eco-friendly clothing line. It was a risk, but I was excited about the possibility of creating something meaningful. Months passed, I threw myself into my new business, working long hours to get everything up and running. It was hard work, but incredibly rewarding. Slowly but surely, my little company started to gain traction. Meanwhile, through the family grapevine, I heard snippets about Sadie's wedding plans. Apparently, she'd managed to convince Cole's parents to foot the bill for a scaled-down but still lavish affair. I tried not to think about it too much, focusing instead on my growing business. Then, about a year after our big blow-up, I received an unexpected call from my mom. Alyssa, she said, her voice tight with worry, I think you need to come home. It's about Sadie. I arrived at my parents' house to find a scene of chaos. Sadie was there, mascara streaking down her face as she sobbed on the couch. Cole was pacing back and forth, looking stressed and angry. Our parents sat nearby, looking shell-shocked. What's going on? I asked, feeling a sense of dread. Between sobs, Sadie managed to choke out the story. The wedding had been a disaster. The venue had double booked, forcing them to change locations at the last minute. The florist had used the wrong flowers. The caterer had served food that made half the guests sick. And now, Sadie wailed, we're in debt up to our eyeballs. The credit card bills are piling up and Cole's parents are furious because we spent way more than they agreed to. We might have to declare bankruptcy. I stood there stunned. Part of me wanted to say, I told you so, but I bit my tongue. Instead, I asked, what do you want me to do about it? Sadie's tears magically dried up as she looked at me with hopeful eyes. Well, she said, her voice suddenly sweet again, I was hoping you might be able to help us out, with some of that inheritance money you've been hoarding. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. After everything that had happened, she was still trying to get her hands on my money. I took a deep breath, counting to 10 in my head before I responded. Lady, I said, keeping my voice as calm as possible, I'm sorry you're in this situation, but I can't bail you out. My inheritance is tied up in my business now. Even if it wasn't, I wouldn't feel comfortable enabling this kind of financial irresponsibility. Sadie's face contorted with rage. You bitch! She screamed, leaping to her feet. You've always been jealous of me. You're probably happy this happened. Sadie, our mom gasped, shocked by her outburst. I held up my hand, silencing them both. I'm not happy about this at all, I said firmly. But this is a consequence of your own choices, Sadie. You chose to have a wedding you couldn't afford. You chose to go into debt. Now you have to choose how you're going to fix it. How dare you lecture me? Sadie shrieked, advancing towards me with her hands clenched into fists. Cole quickly stepped between us, holding Sadie back. I think it's time for us to leave, he said, shooting me an apologetic look as he steered Sadie toward the door. After Sadie and Cole stormed out, an uncomfortable silence fell over the room. Finally, my dad cleared his throat. Alyssa, he said hesitantly, are you sure you can't help them out even a little bit? They're in a really tough spot. I couldn't believe my ears. Dad, I said, fighting to keep my voice steady, do you remember when I wanted to go to that expensive college for my master's degree, but you said I had to figure out how to pay for it myself? You said it would teach me valuable lessons about financial responsibility. My dad nodded slowly, a look of realization dawning on his face. Well, I continued, this is Sadie's chance to learn those lessons. If we bail her out now, she'll never learn to make responsible choices. To my surprise, both my parents nodded in agreement. You're right, my mom said softly. We're probably done Sadie a disservice by always giving in to her demands. It's time she learned to stand on her own 2 feet. The next few months were tense. Sadie refused to speak to any of us, blocking our numbers and all social media accounts. Through the grapevine, we heard that she and Cole had indeed declared bankruptcy. They had to move out of their fancy apartment and into a small rundown place on the outskirts of town. Despite the hardships, Sadie's attitude didn't seem to change. She started a GoFundMe campaign, spinning a sob story about how her greedy family had abandoned her in her time of need. Some people fell for it, but most saw through the charade. Meanwhile, I threw myself into my work. My sustainable fashion business was starting to take off, and I was putting in long hours to keep up with demand. It was exhausting but incredibly rewarding to see my vision come to life. About 6 months after the wedding fiasco, I received an unexpected message on social media. It was from Cole, Sadie's husband. Alyssa, I know Sadie's blocked all of you, but I thought you should know what's going on. His message read, she's spiraling out of control. She refuses to get a job, saying it's beneath her. She's been maxing out credit cards faster than I can cancel them. I don't know what to do anymore. I felt a pang of sympathy for Cole. He seemed like a decent guy who'd gotten caught up in Sadie's whirlwind. I wrote back offering some financial advice and the number of a good credit counselor. A few days later, I received another message from Cole. Thanks for the advice, but Sadie hit the roof when I suggested credit counseling. She says I'm siding with you over her. I think I'm going to file for divorce. I can't live like this anymore. I was sad but not surprised. Sadie had always been stubborn. But I had hoped that facing real-world consequences might finally knock some sense into her. Apparently, I was wrong. Over the next year, things went from bad to worse for Sadie. Cole did file for divorce, leaving her to fend for herself. She bounced from one minimum wage job to another, always quitting or getting fired after a few weeks because the work was too hard or her bosses didn't appreciate her talents. She tried to relaunch her influencer career, but her erratic behavior and constant pleas for money turned off most of her followers. Her posts became increasingly bitter and angry, full of rants against the unfairness of life and how everyone had abandoned her. Our parents were heartbroken. They tried reaching out multiple times, offering to help Sadie if she agreed to get financial counseling and stick to a budget. But she always refused, insisting that they should just give her money with no strings attached. As for me, my business continued to thrive. I worked hard, reinvesting most of the profits back into the company. It wasn't always easy, but I was proud of what I was building. There were some hard times where I really thought that I had failed and that the business wouldn't make it. But we pulled through every time, and I think the business is better for it at the end of it all, especially when we started gaining real profit. Sadie's reaction to stories of my success was predictable. She started posting nasty comments on any article about me or my company, accusing me of stealing her ideas and claiming that I'd sabotaged her influencer career out of jealousy. It was frustrating and hurtful, but I try not to let it get to me. Then, about 2 years after the wedding disaster, I received a call from a number I didn't recognize. When I answered, I was shocked to hear Sadie's voice. "Alyssa," she said, her tone sickly sweet. "I've been doing a lot of thinking, and I realize now that I might have overreacted a bit about the whole wedding thing." I held my breath, hardly daring to hope that she'd finally come to her senses. But then she continued. "So I was thinking, since you're doing so well with your business now, maybe you could spare some money to help your poor sister out, let bygones be bygones." I felt my heart sink. She hadn't changed at all. "Sadie," I said firmly, "I'm not giving you money. If you genuinely want to turn your life around, I'd be happy to help you find resources for financial planning and job training, but I won't enable your irresponsible behavior." Sadie's sweet tone vanished instantly. "You've always been stuck up," she shrieked. "You think you're so much better than me. I hope your precious business fails and you end up in the gutter where you belong." She hung up, leaving me feeling drained and sad. I'd always hoped that one day Sadie would grow up and we could repair our relationship. But now I had to face the fact that it might never happen. In the years that followed, Sadie continued her downward spiral. She burned through friends and romantic partners, always blaming them when things went wrong. She tried various get-rich-quick schemes, but they always failed because she wasn't willing to put in the necessary work. Our parents eventually had to cut contact with her too, after she stole our mom's credit card and maxed it out. It was a painful decision for them, but they finally realized that their attempts to help were only enabling Sadie's destructive behavior. As for me, life went on. My business continued to grow, and I eventually met a wonderful man who became my husband. We had 2 children, and I made sure to teach them the value of hard work and financial responsibility from an early age. Sometimes I would think about Sadie and feel a twinge of sadness for what might have been, but I knew I had made the right choice in standing my ground. My inheritance had allowed me to build a successful business and a happy life, all because I hadn't given in to Sadie's demands. The last I heard, Sadie was living in a small apartment, still jumping from job to job and blaming the world for her problems. She never did take responsibility for her actions or try to make amends with her family. It's a bittersweet ending to our story. While I'm happy with my life and the choices I've made, There will always be a Sadie-shaped hole in our family. But I've come to accept that you can't help someone who doesn't want to be helped, and that sometimes the kindest thing you can do is to let someone face the consequences of their own actions. In the end, I like to think our grandfather would be proud of how I used my inheritance, not for a fleeting day of extravagance, but as a foundation for building lasting success and personal growth. That's a legacy worth far more than any lavish wedding could ever be. Here are my thoughts about the story. Like, I get it. We all know that one person who thinks the world owes them everything. But Sadie, she's on a whole other level, folks. I mean, who drops 100,000 on a wedding and has the audacity to demand their family foot the bill? That's not just entitled, that's next level crown wearing. I'm the queen of my Delulu land type stuff. And Alyssa, man, Alyssa's the real MVP here. You know how hard it is to stand your ground when your whole family's pressuring you? It's like trying to eat just one singular strand of ramen noodles when you're starving. Nearly impossible. But our girl Alyssa did it. She stood firm like an oak tree in a hurricane. And let me tell you, as someone who's caved to family pressure more times than I care to admit, I was cheering for her the whole way. Now, let's talk about that plot twist with the bankruptcy. I literally spat out my coffee when I read that part. Like, who saw that coming? I was half expecting Sadie to pull a rabbit out of a hat and magically come up with the money by stealing it, if need be. But nope, reality came crashing down harder than any dreams. And Cole, poor Cole, dude got caught up in the Sadie tornado and ended up in Oz without a yellow brick road in sight. When he reached out to Alyssa, I was like, run, you still have a chance. And he did, filed for divorce faster than I closed my browser when my mom walks in. Smart move, Cole. You dodged a bullet there, buddy. But here's where it gets real, folks. Sadie's downward spiral. That hit close to home. We all know someone who just can't seem to get their act together, always blaming the world for their problems. It's like watching a car crash in slow motion. You want to look away, but you just can't. And can we take a moment to appreciate Alyssa's parents? The way they finally realized they were enabling Sadie's behavior. That's some real character development right there. It's not easy to admit you've been part of the problem, especially when it comes to your kids. Crazy amount of respect for them. Now, I gotta say, when Sadie called Alyssa after 2 years, I held my breath. I was thinking, come on, Sadie, this is your chance for redemption. But nope, she went full Sadie again. It's like watching your favorite sports team blow a lead in the last seconds of the game. Heartbreaking, but you saw it coming. The part that really got me, though, the end. Alyssa building her life, having a family, teaching her kids about financial responsibility. Meanwhile, Sadie's still stuck in her own personal Groundhog Day, reliving the same mistakes over and over. You know, as I was reading this story, I couldn't help but think about all the times in my own life where I had to make tough choices. It's easy to judge Sadie, but the truth is we've all had moments where we wanted the easy way out. The difference is learning from those moments. You know, this story, man, it's not just about money or weddings or family drama. It's about choices. It's about the ripple effect of our decisions. Every choice we make, it's like throwing a stone into a pond. Sadie's choices, they created a tsunami that wrecked everything in its path. Alyssa's choices, they built an empire. But
Anyways, guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you again tomorrow.